Well said. It's about unlearning. It's coming back to who you really are and stepping away from these false narratives and acts that we take on. Yeah, so I'll share it with you, and I'll share it with everyone that is listening here. There's a really powerful way, and I kind of call it my backdoor way into the unconscious.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henchi. Hello, welcome back to The Path to Wealth. Today I'm super excited. We have Amy Wong in the house. Amy is a renowned leadership coach and the founder of Always On Purpose, which helps people and organizations produce extraordinary results and next level impact. Amy has helped leaders worldwide get unstuck, overcome their fears, become more fulfilled in their work. She's helped leaders and teams at startups and companies including Salesforce, LinkedIn, Airbnb, and Facebook to always live on purpose. In this episode, we're going to talk about how Amy got started on her journey of self-contemplation, what she learned along the way that led to the creation of Always On Purpose, and how she helps others live their best life, both professionally and personally, through in-person coaching sessions and her book, Living on Purpose, that she published last year. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And yeah, we already had a great start just before we even got on the record. So this is going to be an amazing conversation. We can already see that coming. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, where did your personal journey of contemplation start? I mean, we all kind of have that inflection point in our life, but what was it for you?
Yeah. Well, admittedly, it started quite young. So when I'm very fortunate in that I was born into a family of a lot of love and a lot of just a lot of compassion. My mom and my grandma were both really quite metaphysical, and some of my fondest memories when I was young, as early as 7 years old, I remember sitting at the dining room table with both my mom and my grandma having such big conversations about consciousness and about how, energy and our thoughts create our reality. What we say creates our reality. What we're thinking influences our reality. And it really, and I remember having conversations about leaders like Krishnamurti and, and then thought leaders at the time, Wayne Dyer. Really immersing myself in a lot of these great people's work early. And so that was always there, and it always ran in the background. And I even have a memory, it was about in 5th grade, and went to the public library with my mom, and I'm in the personal development section or whatever that it was called at the time. And I had stumbled upon Thich Nhat Hanh, and it was his book on mindfulness, and one of his books on mindfulness, one of the early ones. And I remember pulling it off the shelf and just and falling in love with it. And so became very familiar with meditation, reflection, contemplation quite young. And so, like I had mentioned, it was just always in the background. It's funny though, it was always in the background, but there was a pivot point in my life, and it was after the birth of my first child, who is now 14. But it was truly after Aiden was born, I had the most significant breakthrough experience. And the best way to describe kind of a pivot that happened for me was, I didn't realize it, but, leading up to that moment before I had Aiden, I was a human being reaching for spirituality. But then after this moment, I realized, no, actually I'm a spiritual being reaching out to humanity. And through that breakthrough moment, so much had shifted mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and it was a true catalyst for an entire new way of being. And so to answer your question fully, it's always been there, But it wasn't until I really had to I was forced to look at, why am I here? What's my purpose on earth? And nothing like having a child forces you to be so freaking honest with yourself, to look in the mirror and to really see clearly who you think you are, who you think you're not, what you want to be, what you don't want to be, and to have to confront that. Oof, there's nothing like those moments. And for me, it was having my first child.
Oh, so, but given that a lot of people gave birth and that didn't happen, what do you think? How would you help somebody get to such a point? Because I sometimes I'm wondering, why do some people have those inflection points and they ask themselves the question, like yourself, like, who am I? Why am I here? And then there's others who just experience the pain of it without the reflection.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And I think if I were to really go into my heart to answer this, the true one and only answer really is self-awareness. And I think so much of what becomes possible for any of us really only becomes possible due to our level of self-awareness. And there's so much to say about this. Like, what is self-awareness? What does that afford us? But, I think for me personally, because I had been so reflective as a kid and because I had started meditating quite young, I had a pretty rigorous meditation practice at 16 and 17. Actually, it was militant, so I think I worked against myself. But you got to go through that process of really understanding what meditation is and what it isn't. But I had been growing the powers of self-reflection and metacognition and I also have come to realize that I came into this world as a role of a teacher. Like I have very fond memories too. When I was a kid, I would always reflect on, if I was teaching this class, would I do that? Would I do what my teacher's doing? Would I do it that way? Well, no, if I were teaching fourth grade, I'd probably set it up this way. No, and I'd probably do that instead of this. And I was constantly reflecting on how I would teach if I were in this position. And it's funny, I thought that was normal. And I've talked to friends and even my husband, and they're like, no, that's not normal. I never thought that way. I was like, oh, okay. So, so for me, just personally being a role, knowing that my role here on earth is a teacher, and then just being self-reflective, when I got to this moment when I had my child, like I can't describe the intensity of and the extremes of emotion I was experiencing. So extreme bliss, to be so in love and enamored with this human being that had graced us with his presence, and to now be a family of 3 and to feel so complete and full, but then to feel so lost. Because what happened was, now that I have this child, all of a sudden, and for people that have had, especially moms who have a child, here's what happens. Your life, until you realize it is completely, it circles around you, and naturally you're very self-centered. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just what's true. It's self-centered. It's just your world revolves around you. And the moment you have a child, boom, now it revolves over this little being. And the shift in perspective is so tremendous, and it's subtle at the same time, but it's so tremendous. And what you really quickly come to realize is that my entire life now, it's shifted on its axis, and what's important has now shifted in a moment. My priorities have shifted in a moment, and now you're not living for you. You're living really for this being and for the unit, and it's wonky. It gets really weird, and then you start to realize, oh my gosh, so the freedom that I had experienced and what I thought was suffering, that's nothing. Because now I really don't have the freedom I thought I didn't have. That was freedom. Because now that I've got this being, like, everything comes into question. Like, can I go to Burning Man? Is that a smart idea? Should I go on this plane? Should I do these things that I was doing before this child? Now I've got to be more responsible because I'm living for this being too. And so you don't lose freedom of action, because sure, you can get a nanny, you can get your parents to help. it's really that you lose freedom of thought. You lose that freedom of being completely on your own. But nope, now I've got this responsibility that I can't even begin to describe how profound and how amazing it is. But it shifts everything. And in that shift, I personally experienced these extreme emotions where I was like extreme bliss, but also just confusion, just this lostness, because I thought, wow, I was living for my career. I was living for this title. I was living for this status. I was living for what I thought my accomplishments, because that has what I was working hard all of my life. And now when the shift in priority happened, all of that self-reflection just built up and like, wait a minute, hold on. But if this being now is so important to me, then what does that mean about these accomplishments? And what does that mean about this status? And then what happened was it forced me to really confront who I was. And up to that point, I thought I was my accomplishments. I thought I was my status. And spiritually, I'd never had to confront, no, we're not our accomplishments. No, you're not your accomplishments. I didn't even really know what that meant, but it forced me to confront that. So really a dark night of the soul sort of situation.
Yeah. But for many of us, that's kind of the reality, Like when I look back at my past or even the past of my family, there's so much identification with our career path. And I think for many people, that isn't really in question, unless maybe they become mothers. But I think especially for men, you could literally go through your entire life and just stick in your career unless maybe you get laid off, which might be one of those inflection points that allows you to contemplate. But if you have a solid career, maybe even in the same company, you might never get to that point.
Yeah. No, I love that you bring this up, because in my work, I see this all the time. And this is what I think is a huge source of suffering for so many quote unquote successful individuals, even individuals that don't consider themselves to be successful. I would say that what you're talking about really truly is a very real predicament. And I kind of look at our educational system and the way that we develop as humans, the way we've socialized ourselves and the way we've decided how to learn and how to quote unquote achieve in the societies that we've created. And really what happens here is that starting at a very young age, let me go way back. So something that's really important to recognize that we kind of talk about, but we don't really focus on, is the fact that all of us are hardwired for acceptance, belonging, and approval. All of us, we are social creatures at the core. Now we know this, we talk about like, oh yeah, we're tribal beings. But I'm like, well, no, when you think about this from a neurological perspective, what it actually means is that we are hardwired to constantly seek acceptance, belonging, and approval. And rejection truly feels and registers like death to the brain. And so on a subconscious and conscious level, we're doing everything we can to avoid rejection, which also means negative judgment, humiliation, all that stuff. And so when you think about that neurobiology that all of us share, and you look at our educational system, it starts quite young where it's like, okay, I'm in school. Now, you've just tasked me to get good grades, to do it right, to have the right answer. And so we become conditioned to follow what I call a formula. It's like, okay, so you got to do well and do it right. And you got to get the grades and then you got to get the good grades. And so what happens is we start chasing this idea that the right answer, the right thing is outside of us and it's dictated by something or someone else. And so it sounds like this. Go to school, get good grades so you can get into a good college or university so that you can get a good job so you can make lots of money so that then you can be fully realized and a happy person. But by following this is what I call figuring it out. We're figuring it out how to play the game right so that we can eventually have the happy life. But in the process of doing that, we completely lose the ability to feel into what feels amazing, what feels right, what feels inspiring, what feels nourishing. And instead we follow what sounds like a good idea. And so we chase the thing, assuming that it's going to make us happy. But here's the real truth, Hannes, that very few people recognize, is that everything we want, everything we think we want, whether it's more money or a new home or a larger family, it's actually not for the thing. We want it because of how we think it's going to make us feel. So at the end of every desire is a desired feeling state. And the reason we want the thing is because we think it's going to get us the desired feeling state. And none of us really think about it that way. So truly, we're all chasing a feeling, but we don't recognize that. And so then we set off to follow the thing, totally not taking it all the way, mapping it to what we ultimately want to feel. We achieve the thing and then wonder why we feel so empty. And so many of us have been conditioned to do this. So we follow the path, we get all the stuff, and then we wonder, why am I not fulfilled? And we don't know what questions to ask. And then if we don't, and if we haven't been practicing, reflection or self-awareness, we just feel permanently stuck and don't know what to do.
Or it could be that we feel like, the goal hasn't been big enough. There is more there. So you just keep stacking the goal. But if it's not really about the journey and it's always the chasing of the goal, that repetitive emptiness will be there over and over again, which might lead to contemplation.
You named it. This is what I call the unwinnable game. You're absolutely right. The idea that if I just get this next set of conditions, if I just get this next thing that's a little out of reach, I'll finally be free. But the truth is, when you go and reach that thing, you got a whole new playing field, which then makes the next thing in your horizon possible. And and then you just keep going.
So how do I get out of that infinite circle? Just a run-around game.
So, biggest question, and one of the biggest that is asked, and then one of the biggest practices to overcome this unwinnable game, or at least to really come into real peace, is to recognize that there's a whole other way to navigate life. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. Most of us are figuring it out. Now, what does that mean? We're figuring it out. We're strategizing. We are mapping out. We are calculating how to get to the next thing. And we're asking, what is it that I want to achieve? What is it that I want to create? What is it that I want to own? What is it that I want to see in my life? Okay, it's not that question's wrong. But if we really want to create lasting fulfillment, we have to ask a better question, which is, what do I want to feel? What do I want to feel in my life? And the moment you begin to ask that question, it's like, I want inner peace. I want to feel free. I want to feel love. I want to feel presence. I want to feel significance. I want to feel impact. I want to feel, I don't know, you decide. You got to get clear on that. But here's what's so great. The moment you get clear on that, all of a sudden, now you have to ask, okay. So if I want inner peace and I want presence and I want joy, does it make sense to go after this promotion that is going to have me working twice as long, twice as hard for a little more money, that really kind of is going to completely be contradictory to what it is that I'm actually wanting? Right? So we start to ask better questions, but what it takes is asking the question, what do I want to feel? And then the work is, instead of figuring out your next step, you feel out what's next. And so to overcome this crazy cycle, we have to navigate. We have to feel it out, not figure it out. And that really is an art and a science in and of itself.
So when you say feeling, is it more the sense of intuition, or is it I'm feeling like I want to eat a pizza, which obviously isn't the right path to go down right now?
I get this a lot. Yes, it is. There is. So here, breaking it down, I'm going to take it down to its lowest common denominator here. When we look at the universe at large, the universe is expanding by the nature of expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction. There's a duality in creation in and of itself. When we look at existence itself, there's up and there's down, there's birth and there's death, there's light and there's dark. Everything is predicated on this principle of expansion and contraction, this duality. And so as we navigate in our lives, there is an expansive feeling and there's a contracted feeling, and there's an expansive feeling and there's a contracted feeling. And so what it really means to feel it out is to really feel and listen for that feeling of where it's expansive. Right. And I'm certain that everyone that's listening in on this has had that experience of when you get this idea or something comes across this, and there's that, oh, yeah. And like your heart expands and your eyebrows get a little big and it almost feels like the breath got knocked into you when you think about it. You're like, oh. And when you know you're really feeling into your inspiration, there's a feeling of relief. And this is so important because everybody thinks, well, if I'm going to feel into what I want, so if I'm feeling for expansion, then I'm going to reach for that pizza rather than the salad. Well, and so here you have to be very honest with yourself. Does this give me relief? Or am I reaching for the pizza as a way of to sedate, control, or numb my emotional reality, and I just kind of want to check out, right? And so we have to be really honest with ourselves. Like, is that really going to be relieving? Does that make me feel expansive? And so truly to feel out the path of least resistance to the path of most abundance, which breaks the cycle of the unwinnable quest, is to really honor that that feeling of you can actually feel it lower in your body versus it's really tight and busy and frenetic in your head. And because how many of us have had those ideas where, this sounds like a really good idea, but oh my God, it's really frenzied and it feels dense up in the head between the ears, and and it might be exciting. And it might feel really, really invigorating because, this is going to be a great step on that unwinnable quest. But if you feel into it, it doesn't feel relieving. It feels frenetic. And if we want to break the cycle and really free ourselves, we have to commit to following what feels good versus what sounds right, even when it doesn't, quote, make sense. Because it's making those moves that feel expansive, that is the shortest path to the most abundance in really a really powerful way.
So how do you incorporate that in, quote unquote, a normal life? Let's say you're a young mother and you want to live by that. I'm sure that there's tons of people who mean well around the young mother who are like looking at from a logical perspective, like, you make no sense. Like, you have to take care of the little one, stay in the job or do this. It will be very, very hard to go by that level of intuition or feeling into things, because people, especially people that are a lot more logical minded, will think that somebody who goes about life and makes choices or judgments by that, maybe even kind of went a little bit too far.
So there's a really practical, very powerful way to apply what we're talking about around, and this is such a fun and such a eye-opening topic that I actually dedicated an entire chapter to what I'm about to say. It's chapter 4 in my book, Living on Purpose. And really, I'll just cut to the heart of it. But, and I don't want to say this is advice, but if we really want to apply what I'm talking about here, we have to acknowledge and wake up to our relationship to the word should. The word should that plays in our life, this, and I hold that this word should is probably one of the worst words in the English language, because it has us all bamboozled, thinking that it's helping us when in fact it's absolutely holding us back. And so just in its short form, I'll say this, if you reflect on the word should, right? And then you think about how it shows up in your life. Oh, I should go to bed earlier. I should have woken up earlier. I should have meditated. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. Oh, you should. Like, without fail, if you reflect on how it feels, how does it feel? Constrictive, heavy, burdened. It makes us feel bad. It makes us feel guilty. It makes us feel obligated. And then you have to ask, well, why? And then you have to ask, well, should according to who? And then you realize, should according to me? But it makes me feel bad. So what's going on? Why am I doing that? What's going on here? And the whole thing about this word should is that should implies that there is this fixed ideal reality out there that represents the ideal, the standard that we all need to measure up to. And if we're going to live the good life, we have to do it just like this. But then you have to sit back and you're like, wait, but there is no imaginary reality out there that represents the standard ideal. There is no big book in the sky called the big book of shoulds that I need to align myself with. And so what happens is a lot of us get unconsciously trapped to this model, thinking that, my happiness is due to following this imaginary standard, imaginary ideal, which doesn't even exist. But so there's a lot to say about that. But really what I want to focus on here is that what's happening with should, and the reason it feels so bad, and the reason that it holds us back, and that that's all about figuring it out, is because I should be doing it. That's the plan. That's the calculation. Really what's happening is that when we use the word should, what's in our focus is more of avoiding what we don't want versus reaching for what we actually want. And so just to kind of really fill this out and spell it out, let's imagine, for the sake of argument, that everything you want in the world is on this side of you. Let's say it's to my left. And let's say that everything you want in the world, or you don't want in the world, is to the right of you. And so just for the sake of argument, what's happening here is that if you use the word should, like, for example, I should go to the gym. Now, our noble self has tricked us into thinking that we're facing everything we want and we're moving in that direction. Yeah, I should go to the gym because I want health and I want freedom and I want fitness and I want to feel good. No, but here's the truth. I mean, feel into this. If you say, I should go to the gym, particularly now that we are right at the end of the holidays, after all of that celebration and the champagne and the cheese and the chocolate and all that, right? So many of us are saying, I should go to the gym. Well, think about what you're really focusing on. 100% you're not focusing on flexibility and longevity and youthfulness. You're not focusing on that if you're saying, I should go to the gym. What's happening is you're facing all the stuff you don't want, which is feeling fat, which is not fitting into your jeans, right? And so you're facing that and then you're pushing it away from you. I don't want this. And it's that sheer act of resistance that eats up the resources that keeps us from being innovative, from being free, from actually feeling what we actually want. And so just to kind of wrap this up here, if we want to get really good at feeling it out, we have to be very honest about how we are shoulding on ourselves, how we are letting others should on us. And instead of focusing on avoiding negative consequences, we have to ask, no. What do I actually want? So the practice is, nope. It's not what I should be doing. What is it that I want to be feeling? And you take a moment. It's like, actually, I want to feel flexible. I want to feel good. And in that simple pivot of perspective, your horizon of possibility completely opens up in front of you. And ideas and opportunities that were always there, you just can't see when you're pushing and looking at the other way, all of a sudden emerge. And then you're able to move again with very little resistance, more in the direction of more abundance.
So how do you tune somebody in who doesn't trust their own decision making? And that might be because they've been around people that constantly should and judge their decision making and question it. But how do you help somebody tune into that feeling and get them to a point where they actually trust what is going to happen? Because I can see many people, and I have some friends in my mind now who are particularly like surrounded by people who will question everything they do, and they won't last because they, especially if they cannot logically back it up why they make a certain decision, it will be very tough for them. How do you help somebody like that go through that and find the confidence to stick with their intuitive decision making?
Yeah. Oh, great question. There's a handful of ways of going about it, but hands down, my favorite way of growing and building that perceptual ability to feel into ourself and feel and identify our feeling states, it really goes right back to something we were talking about earlier, which is meditation. And so as a background practice that we want to begin doing is to grow that ability to sense into ourselves. And so there's a lot I could say about meditation. And it's so funny because I'll get this question in workshops, regarding anything like, oh, how do I get better at catching my triggers? How do I get better at XYZ? How do I get better? And I'm like, actually, you want the answer? Meditation. And then everybody goes, ugh. They have all these ideas about what meditation really is. I'm like, no. I don't want you to think of meditation this way. So we could probably do a whole session on meditation, or episode on meditation. But I'm going to put that aside. To grow that metacognition, meditation is like going to the gym to grow that metacognition. So that's one thing I want to say. The other is, if we want to get better at feeling into and listening for inspiration and trusting our inspiration, trusting our intuition, trusting what it is that we're sensing, is really start to ask yourself, what is it throughout my day, when I go about my day, when I come across the multiple things that either come across my awareness or come across my experience that make me feel, and really, and it's making a decision, it's intending to, I just notice those things that make you feel a little lighter, that make you feel a little more joyous, that make you feel a little more in tune with who you really are. And just noticing that. So for example, it could be, when you, okay, I'm just gonna make an example. So let's imagine you wake up in the morning and what's the first thing you do? You turn to your phone and all of a sudden you've got these notifications. You go straight to your email. There's that constrictive feeling. So that's definitely not going to make you feel expansive. But then let's say that you got to walk your child to the school bus, and it's in you're walking the child of your school bus, you notice like, oh, wow, look at the dew on these flowers. And you and your child stop and you look at the dewdrops on these beautiful flowers. And there's just this, right? And so it's having that presence enough to recognize, oh, wow, there's this expansive feeling I'm feeling right now with this versus this. And it's taking a moment to feel it, not just notice the dewdrops, but to feel in your body, what does this actually feel like? And to begin to associate, oh, wow, when I'm doing this, I feel this, versus when I do this, I feel that. And we do this not so that you can convince yourself that you need to quit your job so you can go look at flowers. I mean, that's not the path here. We do this to grow the ability to sense, to pick up on the subtle states of expansion and contraction.
So just from a perspective, let's say my greatest intuition leads me into a direction which maybe in our society doesn't lead to monetary rewards. I mean, that kind of actually, that reminds me of Ikigai, how you need all 4 pillars to be fulfilled. And if the monetary rewards are not there, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's never been easier to actually live out your dreams like it is today. I think back in the days, even 50 years, 100 years, you had to be a shoemaker or something. And that was the profession in the village. And now you can just work online. But how do you guide someone who's trying to make sense of taking care of their family as well as following those feelings?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So this really kind of goes back to what we were talking about around being very clear about what it is that you want to feel. Now, for most of us, we want to say financial freedom. Now, but you have to really what does that mean for you? And I know for me personally, financial freedom means I want to know that for the things that I want to do, I'm actually able to do them right away. Is that important? No, but within a 6-month time frame, just to know that I'm able to do the things I want to do. That to me is financial freedom. But it's, for somebody else, if you double click on that, it might be something different. But, again, when we get super hung up on the dollar sign and the number in the bank, we miss out on what's really most important. And, the truth is there's so much joy in being present. There's so much joy in being present and connected with one another. And if we want to break this cycle of, I need more money. There's a monetary amount that I need in order to feel free. It's like, actually, like, what is freedom? Like, look around, look at your day to day. Where are you already feeling freedom, and what is joy right now? And truly, what it all comes down to, again, is deciding that what's most important is how you feel versus what you've achieved. And if you're feeling joy, then you're winning. If you're feeling freedom, if you're feeling connection throughout your day, then you're winning. And that's what's important. And guess what? If you look around at your life and you have the basics, and you're not severely suffering, you can look around and say, oh my gosh, I could feel more joy. I can feel more presence, because at the end of the day, that's all we want, is that feeling of joy and feeling of freedom. And we can feel that irregardless of the conditions. That's a choice. But it's a choice we have to make. And we have to detach that ability to feel joy and freedom from this idea that it takes money to do it, because it doesn't. And there's so much to say about this. Yeah. Please.
It's a very tough one to digest. And I know it's true because I've seen it in so many different places where I've been around the world, whether it's in South America or in Asia. And I've seen people so significantly poorer than what we consider poor in the Western world. And when you look at their faces and when you look at how they conduct themselves with their families, you can tell that they're a lot more fulfilled.
Yeah.
And but there's such a narrative in the West where we seem to be really the ones that run maybe the fastest. It's truly part of it. We're literally the most comfortable and richest probably generation ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I think about it, we're 100 years ago, even the richest man on earth couldn't fly somewhere, couldn't get certain medical treatments, and all of that is available to the average Western person right now.
Mm-hmm. No, what you're talking about is just our competitive capitalism that we are all completely enmeshed in here in Western society. And you and I were talking about this before we hopped on the podcast, but in Gabor Mate's new book, The Myth of Normal, he does a phenomenal job of talking about just the trauma, what our capitalist society is doing to all of us in becoming very, very materialistic. Now, are we demonizing capitalism? No. This is just what we're living. But in the society that we've created, that's now being perpetuated by social media, and our generations as they progress, they're putting their value in stuff rather than stuff versus feeling. That we're perpetuating this idea that our freedom and our joy is out it's out in the material world. We need stuff. We need stuff and we need status in order to feel good. And that is just a falsehood, period. And when we look at, other cultures that haven't been gripped in the way that we have here in the West, you're absolutely right. There is a softness in the face and a compassion in the heart. I remember my husband and I went to Bali. This was a handful of years ago. And it was just so heart-opening and nourishing to see these families and these communities so at peace and so happy and so humble with in the communities that they were living in, these homes and sleeping on dirt floors, but together. And what really struck us, and this is what was powerful, when we had a quote unquote Uber driver take us to a place to go visit, and we were trying to understand the culture, and And we asked him, like, what's homelessness like here? And he looked at us like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And I'm like, well, people that don't have homes, that live on the street. And his eyes got so big and he was like, that would never happen. We would never let anyone sleep on the street. No, we would never let that happen. And so, it's tear jerking, and it was so eye opening. When you come to these cultures that have so much presence, there's compassion in place of materialism. And then you have to ask, like, what's better? What's better? And some could argue it's the stuff. Okay, fine. If that's where you want to find happiness, that's fine. But if we want to free ourselves from this cycle, it's really starting to look at all of this and say, is it in the stuff? Can I find joy with what is? And there it is, Hannes. Can I find joy with what is? Can I be at peace with what is? And find what to appreciate with what is. And from that platform, start to let abundance flow.
Yeah. Well, it's not only in the stuff, but I think everybody needs a certain basis to it, and but it's significantly lower than what we think it needs to be. It's not in all the crazy stuff that one might think, and that a sense of wholeness comes a lot earlier. And I mean, I've experienced that in processes of long and deep meditation where, I was literally stripped of all the comfort that I've ever known and pretty much all conveniences that I knew in the West for multiple months. And I was as ecstatic or had such a sense of wholeness as it would get. And that's the interesting thing, I think, where we can bring those two worlds together. Where we can all share the bounty of the things that we've achieved as humans, but also share that sense of wholeness with each other.
That's just, you're absolutely right. So beautiful. And you're right. In order to thrive, we do need our basic needs met. And you are absolutely right. It's a lot less than we like to thrive. The needs that need to be fulfilled in order for us to truly thrive. It's a lot less than we actually think. And this is where my personal opinion. It's because of the bombardment of, like, we have now all the social media and so much in our faces, and the consumerism. It's hard to really come to believe that it's a lot less because of what we see out there, and so we're comparing our life to the ideals that we're seeing out there, and then we think we're of lack. And so you're absolutely right. And in order to really come to terms with that, I think you have to be so much more mindful of your inputs, because our inputs are really influencing what we think we need and what we think we want.
So you work with people at Fortune 500 companies who are all exposed to a different level of wealth and lifestyle at all times. And it's a very competitive environment, not only at work, but also in terms of, how we all live our lives and kind of the fruits of our labor. How do you help people come to terms, or rather find the wholeness and kind of walk away from that sense of, oh no, I need to level up. Because it, if you live on the West Coast or the East Coast, you're constantly around people that are living on the next level. So it's like an infinite cycle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is really the ultimate work when it comes down to it. It's what you're talking about. And this is what it really all comes down to, the relationship with self. What's one's relationship with self? Now, what do I mean by that? All of us have a relationship with ourself, and all of us have beliefs about who we are. And most of us have beliefs that serve us, such as that, I'm able to do certain things. I'm a kind person. I have a loving heart. blah, 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 blah. I'm strong. I'm athletic. I'm all, we all have beliefs to certain degrees. But for most of us, it's the very rare human that doesn't have what I'm about to say. For most of us, we have imprinted on some level a belief that we're not good enough, that we're not enough in some way. And this has to do with how we develop as young children. Now, if you remember, I had mentioned that rejection registers as death to the brain. And so at a very young age, in order to make sense of significant perceived rejection, the brain will imprint a negative belief. Oh my gosh, I must not be good enough. That's why my mom, gave my cousin an ice cream cone and not me. And, it's those formidable moments in our past that we have very vivid memories of, where we feel, and it's that feeling memory of, oh, I'm not good enough. Now, almost all of us have imprinted that. Why? Because all of us have very immature, that we have underdeveloped brains trying to make sense of the world. And look, life in the world is complex. And to a child who's navigating the world with their parents is going to perceive things that aren't really threatening, really as threatening. And so long story short, all of us, to some degree, most of us, it's a very rare human that hasn't imprinted some form of, ooh, I'm not enough. And so it's born out of that, I'm not enough, I need to prove that I am, that has us on, that starts that cycle of, I need to prove. Well, what does that mean? I need conditions. I need evidence. I need evidence to prove that I'm enough. So if we genuinely want to feel and come to inner peace, to feel joy, to feel freedom, to be abundant, to be successful, we absolutely have to attend to this relationship with self. That is fundamental, first and foremost, highest priority. And it's identifying what are those false, limiting, negative beliefs that we have taken on in order to make sense of the world around us, that we are operating from, that we don't realize, that's that's driving us to do what we do. And so that's really what it comes down to, is the relationship with self, identifying what it is that's imprinted on a mostly subconscious level, and then doing the work to overcome that. And that's why I wrote Living on Purpose, because that's what the whole book is about. It's a roadmap to identify and then free yourselves from all of those self-sabotaging habits that we've adopted in order to survive these false limiting beliefs we've taken on, because it's those false limiting beliefs that have us in the unwinnable cycle, that have us unfulfilled. Yeah.
So given that you said that some of those, or many of them, are unconscious, or in the subconscious rather, how do you tap into that when you work with someone? How do you help them bring that to light? And if I just look at my own history, there's so much that has happened in my family, or maybe that's just been carried on mindlessly, whether it's from them or me, or as you said, as a child, we just take the imprint and we don't even know what's happening. And actually, now that I'm speaking it out, I feel like a large part of becoming whole again is about unlearning rather than learning. But how do you help somebody go through that process?
Yeah. Oh, it's well said. It's about unlearning. It's coming back to who you really are and stepping away from these false narratives and acts that we take on. Yeah. So I'll share it with you, and I'll share it with everyone that is listening here. There's a really powerful way, and I kind of call it my backdoor way into the unconscious scaffolding that we have created in order to stay safe. And the best way I have found that to identify the core false limiting beliefs that are running in the background, that's influencing so much of our reality, is by answering this question I'm going to ask. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is I want you to really take this question in, and I want you to answer only from your survival brain. Meaning, I'm going to ask this question, and I want that fear-based part of you to just let that answer come. Because what's going to happen is there's likely a gut reaction like, huh. It's like, oh, there's the answer. But then our brilliant logical brain comes right in and goes, no. And here's why this isn't true. And it'll try to talk us out of it. So just for the sake of this exercise, don't listen to your brilliant brain for a moment. Just listen to the fear-based brain, the survival brain. And so here's the question. What are you most afraid? Other people, namely other people of influence. But what are you most afraid other people would either decide or find out about you? What are you most afraid others would either find out or decide about you? And you really want to sit with that. And 90% of the time, for everyone I ask this question, something pops up, and it's usually something like this. Oh, that I'm not, actually don't know what I'm doing. That actually, I'm not as smart as people think.
Yeah, but that's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for example, right now you and me are operating in the public domain. Mm-hmm. We're recording a podcast for the public. And I think one of the biggest fears one can have is, you don't want people to think that, they're just like some fraudsters or something, that's...
Yeah.
That it's not solid enough what we're delivering for other people to listen to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that they find out, that we only know this much and we think, or we make it look like we know that much or even more.
Yeah. You nailed it. You nailed it, Honest. And so many, and this is why I had to write Living on Purpose, because I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations. And hands down, one of the predominant answers is I'm a fraud. I actually don't know, I'm worried that people are going to find out that I really don't know as much as I think I am, or I actually don't belong. But notice that fraud in and of itself is of lack. It's not enough. It's there's something off. Now, the reason I ask this question is because this is my backdoor way into identifying what you are believing about yourself. And you are afraid of being found out as true. And how is that the case? Because you wouldn't have answered it unless it was there, unless there was a fear it was true. And that's just how this works. Whatever afraid of it being found out, that's what we're believing on the background, afraid of it being found out. Yeah.
I've interviewed over 100 people just for the podcasts. And I think there was only one person that sat down in front of me and was like, I've never been afraid of, not being good enough or not being enough. And he said it so genuinely different. It really struck me. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is like the kind of rare person you described. And I felt like everybody else is having their own dance with those kind of fears and emotions. And, while on a logical plane, we can tell ourselves, it's fine, and we can rationalize it away, that I think the feeling lingers.
Yeah.
It's very much there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, because there is the very rare individual that will have had been blessed with an amazing childhood, that has been given all the tools and resources to truly know in their capability, and to it can happen. But for most of us, we take on false limiting beliefs to protect ourselves from the pain of disconnection and separation, from rejection. And that's just how it goes. And that's what most of us are dealing with. Honestly, that's where all the dysfunction comes from that we're dealing with here in the world. Just people trying to prove themselves safe. And they take on these acts and these survival mechanisms, and everybody's survival mechanisms are bumping into one another. And that's just dysfunction.
I think a large part of social and cultural congruence comes from that lack. Like, what's the only reason I need to be socially acceptable is because I don't trust myself or who I am solid enough that I can just live on without people's judgment. So I need to look a certain way. I need to drive certain cars. I need to live in a certain house.
That's exactly it. And what you're pointing to really is the locus here of identifying if we're gripped or not. And it's just being really honest with yourself. And how much of you do you feel like you need to prove to either to others or to even to yourself? And how do you do that? Because by getting the next big thing, or by getting that promotion, or making more money, or just that drive to prove is absolutely, completely born out of the need to compensate for a inborn sense of lack. What else would you need to prove? And even if you say, well, I want to prove it to myself. Well, why? Because there's a part within ourselves that we're afraid that there's not enough. And you could say, well, isn't that drive? Isn't that challenge? There's a difference between wanting to excel and to grow. That's a very natural, very healthy, very human, just part of existence is to continue to expand and to grow. But to do it, to prove, that's a different energy.
Yeah, I think, you just basically answered it without me actually asking it, because I was just about to say that there are those distinct moments when I know I'm capable of a lot more. You know, I know this person, this body and everything. It's just capable of more, and at the end of the day, I would like to explore that. But then, what's the need to prove it? You know, it's just take it to those capabilities for the sake of it.
Yeah, that's exactly
right. No need to prove it.
Mm-hmm. You do it because it feels.
But again, so now nourishing. we're still on the logical plane. Like, I get this logically, but how does that become a living experience in my day-to-day, 24/7?
Well, there's a handful of steps. And again, that's, I've mentioned my book a couple times here, but the reason I had to write this book, Living on Purpose, was because there are some very fundamental things that I found in all the conversations that I've had with so many clients, really from all walks of life, was that there were some pretty fundamental themes that I found in the ways in which we really get in our own way from thriving in the way that we're talking about and perpetuating a lot of this stuff that doesn't serve us. And the subtitle of the book, Living on Purpose, is 5 Deliberate Choices to Realize Fulfillment and Joy. And so if we want to practice this as you ask, it's going to take us making choices in a new way. Now, not choice necessarily at the level of action, but it's choice at the level of perception. And these 5 choices that I break down, and one of them you've now already heard. 2 of them actually I've shared. The first is feel it out, don't figure it out. The second is choose to know that there is no way things should be. Right? Because that really holds us underwater. And then in concert, there's 3 others that we have to really choose to take on. And I say choose because we can't prove it to ourselves. Because if we prove it, we're perpetuating a cycle of that unwinnable quest. Choice. To choose, to make these certain perceptual choices and walk the path of these things will actually help. Now, one of them is so fundamental. Is when we can choose to know that we're already enough, we're already whole and complete. Like, that is so mind bending for folks. Because for so many decades, they've been practicing trying to prove themselves complete. But I encourage everyone here listening, try this for a moment. Can you right now just choose to know that you're already whole and complete? Some of you might be able to be like, yeah, well, great. Then you're on the path. Then you're well on the path. So keep going. But for most of us, it's, well, no, because I haven't XYZ yet. Well, no, because I have this from my past. Well, no, because of this about my personality, we come up with justifications on why we aren't already whole and complete. And so what we do is we set off to prove that we are. We work to become whole and complete, which really is the act of proving, which keeps us from being complete. And so there's a lot to it, but I mentioned the book Living on Purpose because it was so important to me to answer this question at scale for folks, because what we're talking about is so incredibly pervasive.
Well, Amy, this was a very, very deep conversation. I thank you so much for making the time, and I encourage everybody to check out her book, Living on Purpose by Amy Wong. I'm sure you can get it anywhere where you can find books. And we will also make sure to put it in the show notes. Where else can people find out more about your work?
Thanks. Absolutely. So my website has a ton of information. That is alwaysonpurpose.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, which is Amy Eliza Wong. or you just search me up, Amy Wong, always on purpose. It'll all pop up. But that's where I pretty much hang out, those two spots.
Awesome. Amy, thanks again. This was deep, insightful, and, I think a lot to think about for everybody, including myself. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.